Okay. Welcome back to another class session. Today, no. I get it. We are burnt out. You are burnt out. Your students are burnt out. So what are we going to do to change it? How can we change it? My name's Dustin Backey. Welcome back to Epic Higher Ed, where your epic classroom begins. In this video, we're going to go over 10 different ways to prevent burnout this spring semester, and we're going to talk a little bit about what the burnout cycle is. So I mentioned this idea of a burnout cycle, and I really believe that you and your students share a cyclical burnout relationship in the fact that when you feel burnt out and your energy coming into class is burnt out, your students feel that, they notice it, and that causes them to be burnt out. You're not excited. Why should they be excited? You're struggling. They are struggling. We know as teachers that we get a lot of our energy from our students. So when they're feeling burnt out and they're feeling tired and exhausted, they don't come to class with a lot of energy or enthusiasm, which makes us dread class because you're teaching to the black screens and there's no engagement and so on and so forth. However, on the other side of it, when your students come to class excited, engaged, in a good mood, it puts you in a good mood. And vice versa. When you come to class with good energy and you're excited and enthusiastic, your students want to be there. They want to be a part of it, and the cycle goes the other way. So what I want to do in this video is really look at how we can get the cycle spinning the way we want. So these first tips that we're going to go over are all things to do right now, right at the beginning of the semester. So the very first one I have for you is really to kick it off right with the energy you bring in that first week or two. You're as rested, hopefully, as it's going to get. Now's the time to capitalize it and set things off on the right foot while you have it. And it's okay to say something like, look, I know we are hoping to be together this spring, and hopefully we can be together back face-to-face before too long, but I am really excited for what I have prepared for you. I'm excited for the opportunities that being online brings, and I know it's still going to be a great semester. Just say something like that. You can be honest. Hey, I know it's not ideal, but it's going to be good. And say that, set that expectation. Come in with that energy. That's the first tip I have for you. Okay, tip number 2 that I have for you is going to really start to set the idea for a lot of these tips, including the last one, in terms of an intentionality behind what we are doing. If we are not intentional with the way we approach our teaching, things are going to slide away from us and we're going to fall back into that burnt out rut. And so the second tip is to lean into your strengths. And what I mean by this is there is a shiny object syndrome in online teaching. The newest cameras, the newest microphones. What is this new teaching strategy? What about that one? Are you using Flipgrid? Are you using Remind? So on and so forth. And what we get is 1, tech bloat, but 2, you're using tools that some internet yahoo in a red shirt and a hat convinced you needed to do, even though it wasn't natural to you. And so I want you to be intentional and lean into your strengths. So when you hear about new tools and new tech and things like that, ask yourself, is this something I'm excited for or that someone convinced me I should do? Is this something that plays to my strengths? Okay, tip 3 that I have for you is to consider changing the way you teach. Now, you're a good teacher. I'm not saying that your teaching is bad, but online teaching and learning does not look the same as face-to-face learning. And so if you try to do a direct transpose, it's not going to go well. And that may have been what led to being burnt out last semester. We want to be in front of our students. We want that student connection and engagement. But all the research shows that in online learning spaces, asynchronous type learning environments tend to be better, tend to be more effective. However, if you ask your students are saying they want more synchronous. They don't like their classes that are asynchronous. So we need to find a balance. We know that asynchronous is good for them in terms of learning, but also in terms of burnout. We know that Zoom fatigue is real. So how can we find a balance between incorporating a bit of asynchronicity into your class and maybe cutting back some of the synchronicity in your class? Flower Darby recommends a 75-25 split for asynchronous to synchronous, in terms of she holds one synchronous session a week and then the rest is asynchronous. And that doesn't mean that you have to disappear. Asynchronous does not mean here are your 16 weeks of assignments, I'm going to disappear into the hills and never hear from you, or you never hear from me again. That's not what asynchronous learning means. It means that instead of everyone coming together at the exact same time, you are answering questions on discussion boards or other avenues within your course LMS. It's just not everyone coming together at the exact same time. And one of the big arguments I have for this is you are here watching a video on the internet learning. Chances are you've learned something on the internet before, and chances are it was completely asynchronous. It was a piece of information, a learning thing, a piece of content that existed for you to digest at your own speed, at your own pace, in the way that you want. And that's how you chose to learn. Okay, tip number 4 here, going back to intentionality, I want you to take a clear, critical look at your course curriculum and ask yourself, down to every single assignment, why are you doing it? Workload is high. We need to take some stuff off of our plate or redesign things to be more sustainable. And so if you're doing weekly quizzes just because the person whose syllabus that you got handed when you took over the class did weekly quizzes, maybe you don't need to be doing weekly quizzes, or maybe they could be done in a different way that takes work off of your plate or makes it more sustainable for students, right? Be critical about your curriculum and be intentional. If you need help doing this, I walk through it in depth in my course mapping training on Epic Higher Ed, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. Okay, the 5th tip I have for you is maybe a bit controversial, and that is to get organized. So why is this controversial, and how does it contribute to the burnout cycle? Well, if your course structure and due dates and expectations and what you're doing and everything is just kind of swirling around up here in this ethereal plane around your brain, well, that's a lot of mental energy to carry for one class, yet alone all your classes. So that's hard on you. But 2, on your students, it's not clear. One, you are responsible for communicating all of that, so that's hard. But 2, they are going to be responsible for catching every little detail and putting it all together. Whereas if you got organized, got it all written down, yeah, that's some extra time up front, but then that means you're not going to be fielding it's in the syllabus type questions, right? If we get those all laid out, you're going to field less of those and more of the actual content type questions. Your students will know how to navigate your course and succeed. So getting organized, it alleviates the burnout on both you and your students. And so why is this a controversial recommendation? Anytime I tell or recommend people to get organized with their course curriculum and expectations and stuff like that, I inevitably get people being like, God forbid students have to learn, or it's hand-holding, or stuff like that. And the thing is, I actually really believe that it is empowering to students. Why? Now, if you have these expectations right now, you're not doing the learning for them. You're setting the parameters for their learning or the parameters for their expectations. The content is still up to them. So this empowers students to take responsibility for their own learning because they are set up with everything they know they need to do. So now they just need to do it. That is an empowering thing to say, okay, I know what I need to do. Now I need to do it. And people say, well, students should figure out how to make checklists and how to be organized and how to do that. Yeah, but we are teaching adults who just came from high school, and that isn't taught a lot in high school. And so you being organized and structuring it provides great foundation and a great example for what it looks like to organize your responsibilities and organize your learning. How do you do that? Well, you could give them good examples of it. So I encourage you to get it out of here, get it written down or typed out or saved somewhere that you and your students can use and reference. If you want help, or if you want to do what I do with a course map, like I said below, or just a few minutes ago, below in the description is the link to my course mapping training, where I give you the templates and everything you need to do to create a really beautiful, organized course document that your students can use. Okay, the sixth tip also kind of relates to getting organized, but we want to facilitate as clear of communication as we can. And when I say clear communication, we can be really articulate, we could have really great announcements, but we want all of those to come from ideally one place. A mistake I made in the fall was I tried to have multiple avenues of communication in order to accommodate students for whatever they need. Now, this meant that I had like 3 different places that I had to check regularly and answer to, and conversations would hop between these 3 things. But not only that, I found that students said, I wish there was just one avenue of communication. There's a lot of different options, but be very clear about how communication happens in your course and streamline it. Okay, the 7th tip is also kind of piggybacking off of the previous tip, where I want you to set boundaries. Set healthy boundaries between you and your students. Brene Brown actually argues that setting boundaries is being compassionate. It defines the relationship and allows it to be as meaningful as possible within that, without either side taking advantage of each other, which becomes unhealthy. Some of the boundaries I might encourage you to set is email hours. So encourage people to email you at any time, day or night, but then let them know that you will only be replying during certain times. This sets a boundary. 1, you're not checking email constantly, so that workload and stress level drops for you. 2, if people know you're only going to reply between 4 and 5 p.m. and they have a question at 8 a.m. or they need answered before 8 or 9 a.m., they're going to do the legwork to try to answer it themselves because they know you're not going to do that. In order for them to be effective, you have to hold firm to them. Other boundaries that I really encourage you to use: all notifications off. I actually have all my notifications turned off on my phone. The only noises it makes, or badges or dings, is when an incoming call is coming in from a registered number. I'm the person who, if I see a badge or hear a ding, I cannot not look at it. So not hearing those things frees up a lot of mental space. Okay, tip number 8. This is to make it fun. If your Zoom classes and your synchronous sessions are boring as all get out, no one's going to want to be there and you're not going to get engagement. So do things to make it interesting. A few things that I like to do: I love kicking off the class with some music. It's okay to take 2 minutes to set the tone. I always like to start class with a little bit of a game as well. There's either or type games, can really get discussion going. Do a word fall where everyone prepares a little statement in the chat, but they don't press enter until you tell them to. And then all of a sudden your whole class, the chat just goes and a bunch of answers come up. It can be fun. You can do boring facts. Just make it interesting, make it fun, make it so they want to be there, and start out with laughs. Try to do something that's going to get people laughing. Number 9 is to actually experiment and try time blocking. And what time blocking is where you approach a day or a week and you block out very specific times for very specific tasks. So maybe you say every day from noon to 1 is lunch. And now I know that's silly, but it's important to take breaks. So I went with that. But maybe you say Tuesday, Thursdays from 2 to 3 o'clock will be grading. And during those times, I will grade. And the reason we do this and the reason we want to time block is being intentional with our time. But there's this idea that work and responsibilities will fill up to take the time they are allotted. And so if you don't have defined parameters and defined times on your work, it's going to expand to fill it all. Time blocking can really help you align your week with the way you want your week to look. Take a moment and say, what do I want my week to look like? I don't want to be grading after 8 p.m. Okay, put your grading somewhere else. Really block it out in a way that aligns with your ideal week, and then hold to it. All right, my 10th tip here and last tip of this video is to be authentic and to be real. Be yourself, right? It's easier to connect. It's easier to enjoy time with someone who's being a person and not a teaching robot who is there. I know it can be hard from behind the camera, but if you really focus on talking to the lens, like I am here, you will get the hang of it, and you can be yourself. You can be silly. You can be goofy. You can talk about Pokemon or the sports team you're watching. If you're a Green Bay Packers fan and you want them to go to the Super Bowl, talk about it, right? You're not going to cut a ton of time out of class to do it, but interjecting those small things and being authentic to who you are will go a long way to making teaching enjoyable, because you get to be yourself, and that's a good thing. When we have to put on facades, it wears us out. So be authentic and be yourself. Okay, I want to say thank you so much for sticking through that video, all of those 10 tips. I would love to know in the comments below which ones you're gonna try. I would love to hear how it goes. If you try one of them and it goes well, let me know. If it goes poorly, let me know. I want to hear about it. And I humbly ask you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and to hit the bell icon. That goes a long way to making these videos a reality for me, who teaches full-time and is also a dad full-time of 2 boys. Thank you all so much. If you haven't gotten a chance to get my free teaching companion at Epic Higher Ed, it will go over a ton of tips that you could implement in your next class to boost engagement, improve inclusion, and to help teach with compassion. So I'll have a link to that in the description below. Over here, I have a couple of videos that you might also enjoy. Good luck this spring, and I'll be there along for the ride with you.